Hey, hey, 16K, what does that get you today? Very, very little. Back in 1982, my parents decided to buy a 16K Sinclair ZX Spectrum as our first home computer. At some point, we blew it up and it was replaced with the 48K ZX Spectrum. It was my first introduction to games and programming, so I thought I'd revisit the top 10 Spectrum games from my childhood. I'll point out now that there are some exclusions from this list. Most games of the 8-bit era were released on other computers, and games that people might pick in their top 10 are games that I would have played more on the Amstrad or the Commodore 64. So kicking off at number 10, we have Horace Goes Skiing. This game starts out with a Frogger kind of knockoff, but one so unhinged that the cars overtake each other while you're trying to cross the road. Once at the ski shop with skis procured, you then have to cross back to complete the titular quest and go skiing. The skiing part is meh. At number 9 is the classic Chuckie Egg. This game is a pretty fun platformer where you have to grab all the eggs without doing all the death. Once you beat a few levels, the angry chick comes out of the cage and starts chasing you around the map, and it just gets pretty manic very quickly. The music on the Spectrum version is fairly bad, with a particularly long sequence for death. By comparison, the BBC version was by far the superior version. Number 8, the first of many games on this list from Ultimate Play the Game, who later on went on to become Rare. Cookie's objective is pretty simple. You shoot the ingredients to make them fall into the pot, and you keep the rubbish out, and don't let anything touch you like most Spectrum games. The game itself is hard as nails, if I'm honest. Maybe that's just my older perceptions of it. At number 7 is another Ultimate game, the onomatopoeically named Psst. With this, you have to fight off different bugs with corresponding bug spray to allow a plant to grow to full size. It too is particularly difficult. Number 6, continuing the Ultimate theme, is Jetpack, which is one of the more famous Spectrum games made by Ultimate. You start by building a rocket and then fuel up to leave each level, and from there you proceed to hunt out fuel and gems or jewels. Each level from there is a quest for more loot and fuel. This game got a remake years later and can be seen on the Rare Replay pack with a full 20-30 years of facelift work. At number 5 we have The Hobbit, which is one of many Melbourne house games that I've owned in my youth, and responsible for kicking off my lifelong love of adventure games. Years later I'd get my hands on the Graphic Adventure Creator Kit, or GAC as it's otherwise known, on I think it was either the Amstrad or the Commodore 64, and start making my own terrible graphic adventures. I didn't have anywhere near the level of skill with artwork that the guys at Melbourne House obviously had, so understandably my games were awful. Now number 4 was going to be Codemasters' classic Dizzy 3, but then I remembered I didn't actually play Dizzy games until the Commodore 64, so instead we have the excellent Lords of Midnight. This game was another adventure game that I played at the time, and it's amazing just how much was squeezed out of the Spectrum's hardware. It might not look very much now, but back then this would have been groundbreaking. For number 3 we go back to Ultimate for the classic Sabrewulf. This game is responsible for many hours of my life just vanishing. You play an adventurer running around the jungle, trying to find loot and escape nasties. There are a number of power-ups that do strange things, like make you immortal or reverse your controls, and for the most part it's a good mix of early game mechanics. Now I realise a lot of the games on this list are from Ultimate, and to be honest I was playing most of their games at the time. We only had the Spectrum for about 2 years before moving to an Amstrad, so here are a few games that are excluded from this list because I played them on the Amstrad or later computers, but here's some comparisons. We have Way of the Exploding Fist on the Spectrum, and then you can see the much better graphics of the Amstrad version. We have Analog Software's Atlantis, which I never played on the Spectrum, but I played quite a lot on the Amstrad, and as you can hear, the qualities are so much better. And then Jet Set Willy. I know it's heretical to exclude it from a Spectrum list, but I played it on the Amstrad and it was much better. The music was fantastic, the sound effects were good, and the game was a lot nicer on the Amstrad than the Spectrum. So number 2, predictably, is Manic Miner. This is the definitive tough-as-nails platformer from the heyday of the home computer boom. If you go to a computer museum, I think there's one in Bradford, you'll see this game on display as a proud piece of gaming history. Definitely give it a play, it can be hard as nails. And finally, here we are, the number 1 game in my opinion on the Spectrum from the time I played it is Attic Attack. This is an excellent dungeon crawler game where you play one of 3 classes of character, either a knight, a serf or a wizard, and each has their own shortcuts through the house. The goal is to get all 3 pieces of the front door key and finally escape. There are lots of things like closing doors, traps, tunnels that cut across parts of the map. It was one of the first games I can recall sitting down to actually draw a map out to plan how to beat it. And strangely enough, it's one of the few games I actually completed on the Spectrum. So that's it, my top 10 Spectrum games. If anyone's old enough to remember the Spectrum, drop me a note and tell me what your favourite game on the system was. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe and all that nonsense, and as ever, stay safe out there.